Have you ever stopped to think about the engine that's driving our entire global economy? I mean, capitalism, right? It's fueled some incredible innovation, lifted billions of people out of poverty. But what if that engine, what if it's running without anyone actually at the wheel, just kind of blind to the world around it? Today, we're going to dive into this idea of agnostic capital and explore the friction between its perfect, clean theories and our messy, complicated reality.
So, to get us started, let's kick things off with a pretty powerful analogy. It really gets to the heart of the matter. What happens when a perfect theory runs smack into our imperfect world?
And just like that, boom, in that one single moment of real-world conflict, all the elegant ideals just shatter. A perfect theory about individual freedom suddenly finds itself needing the very systems it wanted to get rid of. Things like law and order, just to function.
Okay, so what does a punch in the face have to do with the global economy? Well, that exact same collision, it happens all the time with the core engine of our economy, capital itself. It's this tool of immense power, but trust me, it has its own punch-in-the-face moments when it collides with the real world.
This brings us to the main character in our story today, a concept called agnostic capital. And this is the force that, in theory anyway, is supposed to make the whole system run so efficiently.
So, in its ideal form, capital is designed to be completely impartial. It doesn't care about your nationality, it doesn't care about ethics, it doesn't care about social implications. Its one and only goal is to find the highest possible return. It just flows wherever it can be most productive, completely unbothered by feelings or borders.
And this right here, this illustrates the central problem, doesn't it? This agnosticism is both the system's greatest strength, it drives incredible innovation, and its most profound weakness. Because capital doesn't see things like a worker's well-being or damage to the environment. To the system, those are just externalities, costs that society has to bear, while the profits go straight to the owners of capital.
Let's make this real. Think about fast fashion. To get the biggest return, capital hunts for the lowest cost at every single step. So that means the cheapest cotton, often grown with damaging pesticides, it flows to factories with the lowest wages and terrible working conditions, and it creates this business model of disposability, which leads to just mountains of waste. From a purely financial point of view, it's a masterpiece of efficiency. But from a human or a planetary perspective, it's completely unsustainable.
So, what happens when this borderless, agnostic capital starts operating in a world that doesn't have one single universal set of rules? Well, this is where the playing field gets incredibly uneven.
The theory of a global free market. It sounds beautiful on paper. It assumes everybody's competing fairly under the exact same rules. But the reality? It's a total patchwork of different political systems, different laws, different social norms. The playing field is anything but level.
The U.S.-China economic relationship is a perfect case study here. China's model of state-directed capitalism uses things like subsidies, currency manipulation, and let's say, a different approach to intellectual property. An agnostic capital, which is always seeking the highest return, is naturally drawn to this. It's effectively rewarding a system that isn't playing by the same rulebook.
And here's the crucial point. Capital doesn't necessarily flow to the most innovative producers. It flows to those who are best at exploiting the system's asymmetries. And this has had a really devastating impact on the industrial base of rule-abiding nations, leading to major job losses and wage stagnation.
Okay, let's look at another major symptom of capital's indifference: the growing dominance of finance over the actual real economy of making stuff.
This is what we call financialization. You see, capital doesn't care if its return comes from a factory building cars or from some super complex derivative betting on a future price. So, as trading financial assets became incredibly profitable, guess where the capital flowed? Yep, right there.
So, how did this even happen? Well, it really kicked off with the dismantling of the financial guardrails that were put in place after the Great Depression. This unleashed immense pressure on companies to maximize their short-term stock prices, often through financial engineering like stock buybacks, instead of, investing in long-term growth.
And the numbers, they're just staggering. Get this. Between 2003 and 2012, America's 500 largest companies spent 54% of their earnings buying back their own stock. Another 37% went to dividends. You do the math, that left a mere 9% for actual investment in their businesses and their workforce. Just 9%.
To really understand how we got here, we've got to rewind the clock. We need to go back to a very different arrangement, a time when the system actually seemed to work for almost everyone.
So, the post-war era, it's often called the golden age of capitalism. There was this kind of social contract that balanced the interests of capital and labor, and prosperity was pretty broadly shared. But then the 1970s hit. Stagflation created this crisis of confidence, and that opened the door for a return to old-school laissez-faire ideas. Deregulation, privatization, free trade, the whole balance of power shifted, and it shifted decisively.
That original social contract was really built on three key pillars. First, a government commitment to full employment. Second, a strong welfare state to provide a solid safety net. And third, a system of collective bargaining where strong unions gave workers a real voice. This whole setup ensured the gains from economic growth were shared way more broadly than they are today.
And this is really important to remember. The point of this whole analysis isn't to just tear down capitalism. I mean, as Churchill famously said, it's proven to be the most effective system we've tried. So the real question isn't whether we should abandon it, but how can we upgrade its operating model for the 21st century?
So, okay, we've seen how this driverless engine of agnostic capital can create instability all on its own. But what happens when you pit a relatively open, rule-based economy against a state-directed one that is playing by a completely different set of rules? Now that is the critical question we'll be tackling in our next explainer.